This session is an extra to part 6, so let's call it part 6B. Now, those of you who have been paying attention to part 6 will realise that 3/4 of the way through, suddenly the clutch got rebuilt. Now, that's just down to me with the editing, so rather than mess about, I'm just going to add this extra part about rebuilding the clutch. Whilst we're here, we might as well continue rebuilding this side. So of course the next thing to do is to put the pump guard on, and then we can fit the centrifugal clutch. So the centrifugal clutch, if you're using a saw and the chain starts running immediately you start the saw up, it runs fast and there's nothing you can do. You can't make it tick over, or you can't make the chain stand still, so you can't prevent creep. And when you put the chain brake on, the saw stalls. That means that one of these springs is broken, and as soon as you start the saw up, say that one's missing, then these two flyweights fly out and drive the inside of the clutch drum. So therefore, as soon as the saw is started, the clutch is engaged and you can't disengage it. So they're the symptoms: chain running fast and stalling when you put the chain brake on at tick over. And then you know, change the spring, put a new spring in. I got a box with my forestry gear, and it's got springs and oil pump drives and all sorts of things in it, and clutch bearings, which we'll go into in a minute. So that goes on there and it just threads on. There's no need to tighten it up because it'll self-tighten. With the husky ones, where you've got an outboard clutch, you do need to tighten it up if you are going to test the saw without a bar and chain on it, because that'll just come spinning off. As soon as you decelerate the saw, this wants to go faster than the saw and it goes rolling off down the concrete. So that's that in place. Then we've got the needle roller, which needs greasing. Okay, the only grease this poor little bearing ever gets is the grease that you put on it. Yeah, whack some grease on there. At tick over, this poor little bearing is doing 1,000 revs. I was doing a chainsaw assessment recently, and the guy said to me, no, it wasn't, it was a training session, and he said to me, I can't get this, I have to tighten this chain up a huge amount to stop this chain from creeping at tick over. Anyway, I went through all the sort of questions and answers and everything, and I got him to take his clutch drum off, and that bearing was quite dry, so previous to that it felt quite tight to turn this. Just take it apart, grease this up, put it back together, felt quite free, and of course he could get creep free chain at tick over without excessive chain tension. So that just pops on there, and then yeah, that went chink. That just engages with the oil pump drive. So then we put the washer on, and then you've got the circlip, and the circlip engages with that groove, and then you use your box spanner like that and just go chick. That's better. I'm happy with that. So yeah, you always use the box spanner where you can. You're doing this in the woods, never to be seen again. Okay, so that spins quite nicely, quite free, Yeah, always try to put a new one of those on. Whilst we're talking about clutch bearings, here we go. This is a crank off a different saw. I'll try and do a little close-up of this. If you don't grease this bearing, then the bearing wears and starts to collapse. But also, it damages the end of the crank where the bearings run. And it wears towards the outside, so this area here now is tapered. So even if you put a new bearing on, the clutch drum will always be able to rock. And so therefore you'll always get drag and chain run on, tick over. But also, and you can always tell this, if you get a saw that when it's ticking over, you can hear the clutch going ting, 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 you know that either the bearing's worn out or the shaft is worn or both. So again, just look after this bearing, grease it regularly. On some Huskies, you can grease them from the end with that little Husky grease gun thing, which is brilliant. But on the Stihls, you have to take it apart. But, as we've seen, circlip washer, pull it off, dab of grease, put it back together again. Look after that bearing.